She grew up with 11 siblings in the rural state of Acre in Brazil, where her parents struggled to get by as rubber tappers. At age 16, a bout with hepatitis sent her to the state capital for treatment. An illiterate teenager, she dreamt of going to school. So while working as a housekeeper, she enrolled in classes, learned how to read, and befriended one of Brazil's best-known environmentalists, Chico Mendes, whose ideas inspired her to join the Workers' Party. Her name is Marina Silva, and for many Brazilians, it is synonymous with activist politics. At the age of 36, Silva became the youngest person ever elected to the Brazilian Senate. Later, she was named President Lula's Minister of Environment. In the last presidential contest, Silva was a threat to Dilma Rousseff, winning 19% of the votes for the Green Party in the first round elections. This year, she's poised to run again. Having shifted parties, she'll be the vice presidential candidate on Brazil's socialist ticket. In Washington, to celebrate the life of her friend Chico Mendes, the former minister sat with us for a conversation. Minister, thank you for joining us. Chico Vive, or Chico Lives, is the name of the event that you came here to speak about in Washington. How does Chico live?
Para mim, o Chico vive no seu legado.
For me, Chico lives on in his legacy, in his way of seeing the world from the perspective that it's not just money for money's sake or power for power's sake, but the perspective that considers the challenge of sustainability not as something one does, but as something one is, as a worldview, as a way of relating with the self, with nature, and with others.
Consigo mesmo, com a natureza e com os outros homens.
Chico Mendes once said, "At first, I thought I was fighting to save rubber trees. Then I thought I was fighting to save the Amazon rainforest. And then I realized I am fighting for humanity." Tell me about the fight that you were fighting.
Eu gosto muito de uma frase do Eric Fromm.
I like something Eric Fromm wrote, that the love for a person without deep love for humanity can be anything except love. On the day Chico Mendes died, I added to that idea that the love of humanity without a profound respect for nature is also not love. I think the fight, not just mine, but ours, is using our planet's resources wisely to meet our needs without compromising the needs of those who will come after us, which means we have to change how we produce and consume. My fight is changing the development model from unsustainable to sustainable in all its dimensions: economic, social, environmental, cultural, political, and ethical.
Política e ética.
The Green Movement has been gaining more followers, more momentum. It's gone from grassroots to the mainstream. On a micro level, people are becoming more aware of the electricity they use, the gas that they use, the level of consumption. On a macro level, corporations and governments are now being held more accountable for their environmental practices. So what do you think it will take for the entire planet to go green?
O que nós estamos vivendo hoje é o grande desafio.
We're experiencing today a great challenge of almost mutating, a mutation that ensures the caring for nature is ingrained in companies, universities, governments, everywhere. That's what will make the difference. Victor Hugo said that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And an idea whose time has come needs only men and women who are willing, because it's very easy to defend the environment in other people's environment. What's hard is to defend the environment in our own environment. That's our challenge, to include sustainability in public policies and budgets. Citizens have to demand it of their governments, companies, academia, of everyone. That's when we'll really see a transformation.
Nós estaremos já vivendo essa transformação.
Chico Mendes was a rubber tapper. You are the daughter of a rubber tapper. So how has your upbringing helped you become a voice for the disenfranchised?
Acho que a experiência de vida da gente vai...
I think our experiences end up being used throughout our lives. It was very important to have met Chico Mendes when I was 17. It was very important to have been born in the forest and to have depended on it for almost everything: our livelihood, our feeling of protection, the latex that allowed us to produce rubber, the nuts we used for food, the land we used to harvest fruit to survive. It made me exist in two worlds: the forest, which is welcoming, mysterious, and quiet, and the city, which is noisy and more prominent. In reconciling them, I realized we need a transformation that considers those living in both environments.
Que vivem num ambiente criado pelos humanos.
You were a close associate of Chico Mendes. What can you tell us about him that we don't know, and what has he taught you?
A maior lição que ele me ensinou foi...
The biggest lesson he taught me was how he dealt with people. Chico championed big causes, but also looked at people's everyday lives with their simplicity, challenges, difficulties, and potential. He shared authorship effortlessly, built things collectively, and above all, shared recognition easily. This was very important to me because I don't believe in transformations made for people. I believe in transformations made with people, where people become subjects in their own story. That's what Chico taught me the most.
Isso foi o que mais o Chico me ensinou.
So what do you think is the biggest threat to Chico's legacy right now?
Acho que a maior ameaça ao legado do Chico...
I think the biggest threat to Chico's legacy would be our inability to reframe it and update it for today's challenges, and instead simply repeat what he did. We have to think of our political, social, and cultural contributions as they relate to this very unique moment. That's what Chico did.
Na sua singularidade. Foi isso que o Chico fez.
Minister, you have accomplished so much in your life. It's really quite fascinating. You learned to read as a teenager and later rose to be a union leader. Then you became the youngest person elected to the Brazilian Senate. In some ways, your story is similar to former President Lula's. In 2010, you disrupted the Brazilian presidential elections when you won almost 20 million votes. What did winning 1/3 of the popular vote in Brazil signal?
Para mim tem significado muito profundo.
For me, it has a very deep meaning. It means that for Brazilians, the idea of defending a new development model that produces wealth, employment, decent housing, goods, and essential services is not incompatible with environmental protection. And that's the idea I campaigned on in 2010. The 20 million votes I received, even as someone clearly identified with environmental protection, shows that this idea has arrived in the hearts of Brazilians. It's the challenge of the century, and one Brazil can help overcome, shifting the old paradigm that separates the economy from ecology and integrate them.
O mundo vai precisar cada vez mais de fazer essa integração.
In the last year, Brazil has been experiencing a bit of turmoil, though. People are taking to the streets. They're protesting World Cup spending, but at the same time, they're protesting against a lack of social programs like health and education. So do you think that hosting the World Cup comes at an inconvenient time?
Os grandes eventos, eles podem ser...
Large events can become a great opportunity for host countries. The problem occurs when we don't think about the legacy they'll leave. The Brazilian population, which is very passionate about soccer, has sent a strong message. It's a priority to invest to host the World Cup. But it should also be a priority to ensure health, education, public safety, transportation, and a dignified life for people. For me, it has shown cognizance, and it has allowed Brazilians to compare what's being prioritized over much greater needs.
Negligenciadas em necessidades que são muito mais profundas por parte do povo brasileiro.
Corruption has also been a hot topic in Brazilian politics. Why do you think the current Congress has been unable to control it?
Há trabalho que pode ser feito pelas instituições como
There are things institutions like the executive branch itself can do, creating controls to prevent corruption, being transparent, and inhibiting deviations. Congress can be an important tool for surveillance and monitoring. But there's something deeper that needs to occur. Corruption can't be seen as a problem of government, of Congress, or of the judiciary. Corruption has to be seen as everyone's problem, or it will continue to exist. Inflation used to be a problem of government. When it became society's problem, we created economic equilibrium. Poverty was a problem of governments and poor people who suffered serious social exclusion. When extreme poverty became a whole society's problem, we began creating ways for the poor to be socially included. It's the same for corruption or the environment. Until it becomes everyone's problem, there won't be a solution.
Não haverá solução.
The current president of Brazil has been unable to keep the popularity of her predecessor, your boss, when you were the Minister of the Environment. What is the one thing that you can say that she has done right and the one thing that she has done wrong?
Manter as políticas sociais do governo do presidente Lula.
Maintaining President Lula's social policies is good for the country, but unfortunately, the president hasn't been able to establish her government's brand, and today it's seen as a government of regression because of our economy's setback in growth and in inflation, which threatens to rise again. We've also seen large environmental setbacks. The government was not only unable to prevent forest protection laws, but it actually encouraged their loosening. The rights of the indigenous, which were won with great difficulty, are also being threatened. There has been a lack of infrastructure planning, and we're on the verge of an energy crisis. Unfortunately, President Dilma was unable to brand her government beyond being a government of regression.
Essa marca do retrocesso.
Your name will be on the ticket this year as the vice presidential candidate for the Brazilian Socialist Party. What made you decide to switch parties, and what will your platform represent?
Essa discussão ainda está sendo feita.
That discussion is still taking place, but I moved in the direction of the Brazilian Socialist Party of Governor Eduardo Campos when government actions prevented us from registering the sustainability party that I'm helping create in Brazil to contribute to the political process given our current political party's stagnation. And since we were unable to register our party, we took our proposals to someone committed to environmental protection and ethical politics, and who has a clear technology, innovation, and education investment agenda, which is what we also fight for. We've come a long way, but I can tell you I moved towards the Brazilian Socialist Party because the needs, ideas, and proposals they advocated for in 2010 remain relevant in the 2014 elections.
Continuem relevantes nas eleições de 2014.
And lastly, we are seeing more and more Brazilian women in the public sphere. Do you feel there is a new message of empowerment reaching young girls that you didn't experience while you were growing up, and what does this mean for Brazil?
Sem dúvida. Hoje, cada vez mais.
Today, undoubtedly, women are increasingly playing important roles in public administration, companies, universities, all sectors. This, in and of itself, sends a very strong message to girls, a message I didn't receive. But there are still plenty of imbalances to be addressed. Women in Brazil are getting 20% less pay than men for equal work. We've passed laws to address that, but unfortunately, they're not being implemented. But without a shadow of a doubt, women are increasingly contributing to the improvement of our world in crisis. Women have a greater ability to be welcoming, to be resilient, and to work inclusively. And that's precisely the leadership the world needs. I like to say there's a new form of activism emerging, one that isn't led by parties, unions, NGOs, or corporations. It's what I call authored activism, in which each individual is an author, mobilizer, and protagonist. That requires a great level of horizontality, and women have great ease in working with processes of inclusion.
De trabalhar com processos includentes.
Minister Marina Silva, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Obrigada.
Brazil's presidential elections will take place in October, and current President Dilma Rousseff is still ahead in the polls with a likely 38% of the vote. But in Brazil, more than half of the total votes are necessary to win the office. So if the elections were held today, there would be a runoff. Marina Silva, alongside presidential candidate Eduardo Campos, will be one of President Rousseff's challengers, even though their party only has 10% of the votes at this time. Experts are watching carefully as they know she's disrupted elections before.